Hello everyone and welcome to Slash Film Daily for July 17th, 2018. This is Slash Film senior writer Ben Pearson, and today we have a special episode of the podcast to present for you. If you're a regular reader of slashfilm.com, and I hope all of you are, you may have seen that over the past few days we published a number of articles on the site celebrating the 30th anniversary of John McTiernan's action movie classic Die Hard, which turned 30 this past Sunday. The articles that I contributed for this series were full of interviews, and I'll link to both of them in the show notes. But in the first piece, I spoke with cinematographer Jan de Bont, writer Stephen E. D'Souza, and actor Reginald VelJohnson, who plays Sergeant Al Powell in the movie. In the second one, I reached out to a handful of modern directors and writers to find out what kind of impact Die Hard had on their careers, how it influenced them, and more. I'd encourage you to read both of these articles in their entirety, but instead of talking about movie news today, we thought it would be cool to share some snippets from a few of those interviews, including some stuff that didn't make it into the final articles. First up, here's a story from Jan de Bont about how the production used experimental military technology to capture one of the film's most memorable shots.
The sequence where Hans Gruber falls at the end, I've heard that there was like a countdown for that, and Alan Rickman was released at sort of an unexpected time to get his real reaction as he fell. Is that true?
Yeah, it was a really difficult. What we really wanted is like, when you see those shots happen, it's always on blue screen, and we wanted to really, the most important reaction on a person's face is the first second. And if a person really falls down from away from camera, free fall, it goes at such a high speed that you cannot get the focus right. Mm-hmm. That's why nobody ever does it. So we designed a system where there's a computer that tries to set the focus at the rhythm of the speed he's falling. So we had to do a couple different tries with different people, and it was a really difficult rig, and because nobody had ever done that, and it was a really big close-up. I don't know if you still remember. It's right in his face, right in his eyes, and then you see it, and it's a little, and because it's also in slow motion, so anything that would be out of focus would be out of focus for a long time. So the focus was so difficult, and no focus puller could ever get it right. That would be impossible for the person. So we were finally able to do it correct, and then we never know where. You should never tell exactly when it's right, because then if you say they're going to drop you at 3, then the actor is going to respond always a fraction. So it has to be always you should hardly ever do the things on 1, 2, 3, go. It's like, it's 1, and then we know it's going to go on 2 or it's going to go on 4. And so quite often it's better to wait a little bit, and then 1, 2, 3, and then the actor tends to get a little confused, and then you drop, and then you get the best reaction.
Right. Yeah, the thing about the focus pulling is amazing. I've never even thought about that before, but of course that must have been incredibly difficult to do.
It is, because it goes so fast.
Yeah.
He starts about, like maybe 2 feet away from the lens.
Yeah.
And then he goes from 2 feet to infinity in no time. So it is, and if you want every little frame with that, which were quite a few hundreds of frames to be in focus, it is like an impossible task. And it was basically something that was invented for the military, I think, and they were just experimenting with that. It was a little company in the valley, and they had never done it for film either. They had done it for some kind of video shoot for the military, but this was he adapted it for us, and ultimately it worked.
Yeah, man, that's great. So did you do a lot of prep and testing with that before you actually got Alan Rickman hooked up? Like, how many takes did he do for you guys to actually nail that?
I think he did 3 takes.
Oh wow, okay, cool.
Yeah, because sometimes the first take is more, quite often in this actors is a surprise reaction, but not. We didn't want it just a surprise reaction. It had to be the realization that he's going to die.
Right.
And that is so. So you have to give the actor. In this case like this, it's always better to have him make sure that when he falls, he's going to be safe when he hits the bottom, because he's going to fall in a big airbag way down there. But most actors are so worried about all those stunts, and rightfully so, and they should be done safely. So once they know it's safe, and they can much better act, and they feel. But then you still have to time it right. So you still have to surprise him when it really goes.
Next up, writer Stephen E. DeSouza answers one of the film's most burning questions. There's a scene in Die Hard in which Bruce Willis's John McClane encounters Alan Rickman's villainous Hans Gruber on one of the top floors of the building, Nakatomi Tower. Gruber adopts a fake American accent to try to trick McClane, but how does McClane know that Hans Gruber is a bad guy? DeSouza says it was all explained in an earlier version of the film. I didn't include this story in the article because I realized later that we'd already written about it on Slash Film, but it's still cool to hear the writer himself explain it. Here he is.
People never always have a theory as to how McClane knew. How did McClane know that Alan Rickman was a terrorist?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has this. What's your theory?
I mean, I guess I don't have a fully fleshed out one. Maybe just that he would know that that nobody else would be up there wandering around. I don't know. What did you settle on?
Here's the thing. When it's all tied into the same thing. When he kills the first terrorist, I think his name is Tony, the brother of the other guy.
Of Carl, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, Carl's brother. I think the brother's name is Tony. Anyway, he kills that guy. He realizes he's dead. And he searches him. So if you remember the movie, you've seen it recently, like you say.
Yeah.
He searches him. He looks at his clothing. He looks at his driver's license, gives it a long look, and then he finds the cigarettes. And he looks around before he takes the cigarettes. It always gets a laugh if you saw it with an audience because he's a cop, like he feels guilty about stealing the cigarettes. But then he looked at his watch, which also played as a laugh with the audience. That they was always going to take the watch, but he's really honest cop. He only took the cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
Subsequently, he searches each guy. Each time he searches a guy, he takes their ammunition and he goes to their pockets each time. But as shot, each time he looked at each guy, he noticed their watches. And that's because, and then when he got on the phone with the police outside, and he said, listen, these guys are professionals. They have professional equipment. They're highly trained. I think they're from Europe, from their clothing. I think their licenses are like the best I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And they all have the same watch. He said that. We filmed that. Right?
Interesting.
And then when he lit the cigarette, when Alan Rickman, he lit the cigarette, as filmed, Bruce noticed the watch. His eyes actually looked at the watch. And we were, oh, he's so smart. We talked about watches. We saw he noticed the watches. He told the police the watches were a clue. Look how smart he is. And I'm in the audience. I'm as smart as he is. But where this went horribly wrong goes back to the ambulance idea. We did not know how the bad guys were going to get away, except they were going to pretend they were killed in the explosion. But we hadn't articulated it further.
Mm-hmm.
By the time, it was really 2 weeks before the end of shooting, and I said, listen, I did this in another picture that nobody remembers or everybody saw, so let's do it again. Escaping in our fake, I did a thing called The Spirit, which is based on the comic book,
mm-hmm.
the comic strip character.
Yep.
I did a backdoor movie pilot in like 1986, which was so, in a way, like back in that era, like it was sort of like the original Adam West Batman. It was a little bit over the top, and the villain in that was going to blow up a children's hospital. A children's hospital was specialized in like, it was like Shriners, orthopedic things. So there were all these kids in like casts and wheelchairs, and it was like so over the top. You're going to blow it up and escape in this ambulance. So we'll do that again. So now we shoot the movie. We have the first cut, and John McTiernan is there, Joel Silver there, Bruce Willis is there. There are a handful of people. I was there with my wife, maybe 12 people, key people. We start to run the movie. It's temporary track. Sometimes it says shot missing, but we know how to, parse a movie like that.
Right.
All of a sudden, at the same moment, everybody goes, McTiernan goes, oh shit, hold it, stop the projector. Because we realized when they got off the truck, Alan Rickman said to them in German, they paused, he said, gentlemen, synchronize your watches.
Mm-hmm.
And McTiernan had the camera crane up a little bit. They all put their hands out, and they all reset their watches. It went boop, right, which established the watches, and it all paid off. But now we realized, as they stand there, there's no ambulance in the truck.
Oh, right.
Because we hadn't thought of that yet. So now, John turned to Frank, I guess Frank Ariasti, the editor, and said, you got to get the scissors in there the minute they get off the truck.
Wow.
And if you look at it again, you'll see that they had to get them off the truck. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you're paying attention, you can see there's nothing there. But now he said, and also take out all the business with the watches.
Oh, I see. So it was all right in that same.
The audience hasn't been told they all have the same watch. So now, except for the first one, where it plays as a joke, like he's thinking of taking the watch.
Right.
All the subsequent, of him going, like that emoji where you got your hand under your chin.
Yeah. Yep.
All the moments where Bruce did that and saw the watches all had to go on the cutting room floor.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And finally, that meant the alternative shot that's not in the movie anymore, where Bruce's eyes clearly went over to the watch, was devoid of meaning. So that came out. So you're left with this thing that I guess he's such a good cop, he has an instinct for these things. But I've had so many people come up to me with this theory. A lot of people say, well, because the weight of the gun is different with the magazine, the bullets in it, and that's why but that makes no sense because he switched the other guy had not handled the gun.
Right, yeah.
People are desperately trying to go, well, when he handled the gun, the weight was different, and you go, no, the guy never touched the gun, And of course, what makes the scene work so well is John, who has a great, I would almost compare it to Hitchcock, a great sense of what he can do with the camera to control the psychological reaction of the audience members. If you watch that sequence again, as it begins, as it develops, the camera begins to go off angle, the Dutch angle, as we say, right? And then it comes off sticks, and it's handheld. So there's a gradual, uncomfortable feeling of seasickness that develops in that scene as you, the viewer, become convinced, oh my God, he is going to trick, and it's getting worse. And and when he says, what's your name? And he says, Clay, Bill Clay, right? Then it really gets seasick and haywire after that because he's guy's so smart, he thought of that already. So if you watch the sequence again and sort of just pay attention, look at the edges of the frame, and you'll see how subtly it goes from being confident to insecure, to match the uncertainty in Bruce's mind and of course yours as to what the story is on this guy.
That's incredible.
So that's the one that I would think people would ask me more often. How did he know he was a terrorist?
For the second article that I wrote, I spoke with actor-comedian Paul Scheer, who is a friend of the podcast, and he explained how Die Hard inspired one of his TV shows.
I did a show called NTSF SDSUV, which you can see all of them on Hulu. But basically, NTSF SDSUV was my attempt to be an action star. I always knew I could never be in the movies that I loved as the main lead. So what if I just created a show like this? And we definitely had homages to Die Hard on our show and did things like that. It's I think you're always kind of figuring out what could it be? What's the Die Hard version of this? So for me, some very direct parody with NTSF, and then and I think it's a touchstone from a creative standpoint. It's I've even was working on a pitch the other day for a TV show. I was we can kind of this part of these 3 episodes can kind of be a Die Hard, our kind of Die Hard episodes. It's you get caught up to it, and you even see stuff like Game Over Man. It's Game Over Man is essentially, that's Die Hard. It's just, so it's I feel in the comedy community, Die Hard is a go-to as a writer and as a performer too, because it also feels I think all of us feel you could cast me as John McClane. I could be John McClane. Because at that point, Bruce Willis was the guy who was in Blind Date and Moonlighting, which is 2 shows that I loved. That was or a TV show I loved in a movie that I liked. So it was that kind of he's the accessible guy. He's the funny guy. He's an action star. So I think that there's always that idea too that you feel really connected to it. I feel Die Hard is really about relationships at its core. While the action is great and John McTiernan is fantastic and jumping off the building and stuff like that, the things that I remember about this movie, the things that I love about this movie are not when he ties the fire hose around his waist and jumps off the building and the roof explodes. It's the scene of him picking the glass out of his feet and talking to Al Powell. It's the idea of German bear bonds, which is, as a kid I was what is that? It's the characters, it's the relationships, it's the dynamics. And the Holly Gennaro like just the fact that she changed her name when he goes into Nakatomi, like those little subtle things. It's like those are the things that I think when I think on the movie, what I remember, what I love is like these characters and the universality of it. It's like we can all imagine, like, what if I was in a Christmas party and this thing happened? They were all innocents. There's no one in there. It's not a team of cops. It's just people at a Christmas party. Every single person in there is a normal everyday person. And I think there's something universal in the theming, and I think there's something universal about the characters, and that's why it doesn't feel dated.
Here is Dan Trachtenberg, the director of 10 Cloverfield Lane, talking about the great Alan Rickman.
The trick with Die Hard is that it spoils us. Anyone who's making movies is always trying to figure out how to make a great villain. And you usually do that in trying to relate to them and make them gray. And in fact, funny enough, I think one of the best villains outside of Die Hard, who is a gray villain, is Ed Harrison, The Rock, which is a Die Hard clone. But the crazy thing is, I mean, there is a wonderful turn in the third act where you realize he's doing it not for these highfalutin reasons, but he's just a bank robber. He's just an overzealous bank robber. But he's so good. Alan Rickman's so good, and so scene chewy, and so mustache twirly. He's like all the things that we think we shouldn't have in play in a modern movie to make it good, to make a villain good, but he does all of those things so well that he kind of ruins it for the rest of us trying to pull that off.
And finally, here's Brian Taylor, one half of the former filmmaking duo known as Neveldine and Taylor, talking about how John McClane and Die Hard influence Crank.
The thing about Die Hard that really just it really slayed me as a young filmgoer was John McClane. It was the nature of that kind of a hero, because like that movie, it came along in an era where sort of like, you know, the action hero was this roided out, Uberman, right? With like this perfectly coiffed hair and gigantic powerlifter kind of muscles, stuff like that. And John McClane came along, and he was a very damageable hero. You know, this is a guy who had sort of like an attainable sense of humor, an attainable body type, an attainable hairline. He was a guy that could really get hurt and could really get damaged. And it was kind of like watching the movie. It wasn't a foregone conclusion that he was going to make it through. You know, in 2020 hindsight, you're like, of course the hero's going to live. But similar to like, I can't even think of an example from the time unless it's like a Jackie Chan movie. You know, you just look at the amount of damage that the guy is taking and the situation that he's in, and you're like, oh, he might not make it. You know, this is bad. You know, this guy can definitely be hurt. So the idea of a hero that can be damaged and hurt, you know, that the running through broken glass, even though, you know, we always think we saw the running through broken glass. It's like the baby's face in Rosemary's Baby. We never actually see it. You just see the aftermath of it. But, you know, that is so sort of like it's not just a great gag that makes you flinch, but it's just so inherent to the conceit of the movie that this guy is damageable, he's fallible, and it's like the little things, little things can slow him down. You know, he wasn't like Schwarzenegger who just walked through a wall undamaged and take a round from a shotgun in the shoulder and be fine. Now, this is a guy that actually broken glass on his feet can slow him down and hurt him, just like it would us. So he just seemed very damageable and very vulnerable, and that was a huge influence on Crank, where actually like the damage to the character became a plot point. You know, it's almost like the more he's damaged, like he needs to damage himself even more just to kind of get through it. But every now and then, one of those perfect movies just comes along where you can just watch it 1,000 times and enjoy it every single time, and the beats work every single time, and there's no such thing as like a spoiler in Die Hard, you know, because you know everything that's going to happen in the movie, and you can't wait for it to happen, and then when it does, it's just so satisfying. It's just a deeply satisfying movie, and when you know, as a filmmaker, how difficult it is to make a movie, and how many things can go wrong, and how many compromises can lead concepts astray, and to see something like that where just everything clicked, from the script to the performances to the directing to the action, visually, even the music. I mean, to see something like that where it just all clicks, it's just it's so satisfying. It's just so, it just makes it feel like, man, sometimes you just hit it out of the park.
You can read much more about the making of Die Hard and how it impacted a generation of filmmakers in these articles at slashfilm.com. And you can find much more about today's movie news and TV news and all sorts of stuff. We've got Comic-Con coverage coming up. Anyway, just bookmark slashfilm.com, check it out. And you can find more of Slash Film Daily, published every weekday on the site, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and TV, as well as deeper dives into the great features you can find, once again, at slashfilm.com. You can subscribe to Slash Film Daily on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, and concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com, and make sure to leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention your email on the air. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast on iTunes. That really does help us out. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please take a second just to give us a quick rating. Tell your friends, spread the word any way you can, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.